Welcome to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to give you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we get started, I want to ask you a question. Do you think that you are getting enough whole foods and nutrients in your diet? Chances are you probably aren't. Look, it's not your fault. First off, it is expensive and time-consuming, and it's a huge hassle to do all the cooking and all the preparation. But also, we know that our foods today, no matter how much we eat our veg, our topsoil is depleted and there is not enough rich nutrients in our food. And that's why I'm so excited about Ambro Greens, the latest product from one of my favorite nutritional companies out there, Ambronite. Ambro Greens makes it really, really easy to get all of your nutritional bases covered with just 1 teaspoon in cold water. The product tastes great. It gives you tons of additional energy, improves your digestion and gut health, and can even boost your immunity. Now, I have been having this in the morning, and as you can tell, I have a lot more energy. So I've partnered with the folks at Ambronite to give you an awesome deal if you want to try out Ambro Greens. All you have to do is visit ambronite.com/superhuman. That's ambronite.com/superhuman. And you can try the product out for just $9.90. So go ahead and visit that link to try out Ambro Greens today. Greetings, super amigos, and welcome to this week's episode. Hey, I went to go read out the latest review of the show, and I discovered that we didn't get a new one in this week. So if you haven't already left a review, please take a moment. It really actually does help us get the best guests, and it totally cheers us up. On to today's episode, ladies and gents. Today, I was joined by Dr. Brett Wingeier. He is the CTO and co-founder of Halo Neuroscience. He is also an engineer and a neuroscientist himself with 20 years experience in creating science-based products to unlock human potential and treat disease. He's also the co-creator of the Halo Sport, which is the world's first convenient wearable neurostimulator for athletic training. And prior to all of that, he was a clinical scientist and principal engineer at NeuroPace, which brought to market the first fully implantable responsive neurostimulator for epilepsy. Really, really cool stuff. Now, I wanted to have Dr. Wingeier on the show because a lot of you have actually reached out to me and asked about the Halo Sport, this device that you supposedly put on your head and it makes you learn motor skills faster. So I reached out to the company. I said, hey, my audience wants to know about this device. People keep asking me, can I try it out and can I talk to someone from your team? They said, absolutely. They were kind enough to send me a unit, and they told me I could ask all the questions that I wanted to of their CTO and co-founder. And that's exactly what I did. So for those of you who want to know, does this thing work? Yes, it does. If you want to know how does it work, you will find out from Dr. Wingeier himself today. I really enjoyed the episode because it gave me the opportunity to go into a part of learning and accelerated learning specifically that I normally don't get to go so deep on and that I normally feel is a hole in my knowledge. And that is, can we really accelerate the learning of physical motor skills? Can we make our brain connect to our body in faster and more efficient ways? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes, and in this episode you're going to learn how neurostimulation technology works, and then we go a little bit deeper into all the cool and crazy ways that we can actually use electronics and technology and how we will use them to change our brains. I really enjoyed the episode, which is a good indication that you will as well, and so please enjoy my episode with Dr. Brett Wingeier. Mr. Brett Wingeier, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. It's awesome being here talking to you, and it's a good morning in San Francisco.
Yeah, so I've been really, really excited to chat with you because I have actually tried out your product, the Halo Neuro, and I'm the learning guy. I'm all about how can we learn faster. I make a living teaching people how to learn faster. And yet, despite my kind of dilettante fascination with neuroscience, for the life of me, I don't understand how this thing works. So I'm looking to figure out and learn how it works and why it works so seemingly well. Before we do that, though, tell me a bit about your background, your bio, your so-called origin story, and how you got into the field of neuroscience.
Yeah. So I'm going to take this excuse to step way back and just say, when I was a kid, I always wanted to, even from the earliest I can remember, I wanted to build cool stuff that would make human bodies work better. And I was fascinated by cyborgs and all that kind of thing. And I didn't really process that until I learned about this field called biomedical engineering. And I was attracted to the part of biomedical engineering that studies the brain, because it really is it's the untapped frontier of so much that we still have yet to learn. And we've been learning more and more, but there's still so much to understand, because the brain's really what makes us human. So academically, I'm a biomedical engineer. I did my dissertation in electric fields in the brain and EEG, but then I spent most of my career in this field of implantable medical devices. And I worked for a company called NeuroPace for a long time, and we made an implantable brain stimulator for epilepsy that actually sits in your head and watches for seizures about to start, and then stimulates to try to stop them. And then I was there for 13 years. We finally got that product approved and out on the market. It's helping a ton of people right now. But this whole time, myself and my co-founder, we were following this field of non-invasive brain stimulation. In other words, ways to influence the brain with technology that you can just wear. And that whole field had been growing and growing since 2001. And there was all this great science, but it was being done basically with wires and sponges and gauges and things like that. And it was time to make it into a product that people like you and me could use.
Wow. Really, really cool. So as a biomedical engineer, I think you're probably the first biomedical engineer I've ever met. What does that entail? Did you study specifically neuroscience and the brain? And how does one educate oneself or become educated to literally re-engineer the human body?
So in grad school, you focus, and in grad school, I studied EEG and electric fields in the brain and got really deep into the neuroscience. But in a lot of ways, biomedical engineering it teaches you just enough to be dangerous in about 8 different fields. And then sometimes to really make an impact, you need to specialize, because when you look at the body, it's mechanical engineering, it's fluid dynamics, it's electrical fields and electrophysiology. It's all these different disciplines of engineering. It's chemical, it's chemistry, and then when you get down to building the things that interact with the body, you get into software engineering and firmware and all that kind of thing. So there's a ton of things under that umbrella, which is one of the things that makes it so fun.
I love that. I love the just enough to be dangerous. I strive in life to learn just enough to be dangerous in as many subjects as possible. I think that's really, really cool. So talk to me a little bit about the technology that powers a device like Halo Neuro. When someone wears it, and I'll share my experience. I've actually been meaning to write a review, but this can stand as my review. When you wear it, you kind of feel just like a little tingling, almost burning if you have it on the all the way up sensation. And then you go about and I've been using it for piano. I keep forgetting to put it in my gym bag. So I haven't used the setting for legs, and full body, but I've been using it for piano. And one day I used it for the left hand to try and improve my left hand, how I do my bass chords, and another. And then you kind of just go about and you do your session, and you don't notice anything until the next practice session. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I couldn't do that before. And my hands didn't move like that before. So how does that work?
Yeah, and we should talk more about piano in a minute, because I'm a piano player too, and I use Halo for piano.
Oh, awesome!
But the technology under the hood, it's called transcranial direct current stimulation, and at the heart of it, if you put a little bit of electrical current on your scalp, enough of that makes its way through your scalp and through your skull that it creates a moderate electrical field around your neurons. Now, one thing neurons are very good at doing is responding to small stimuli. Another thing neurons love to do is they love to fire together and optimize their connections. It's neuroplasticity. It's the whole mechanism, whereby we learn.
Hebb's law.
So exactly, yeah. So this electrical field, it makes the neurons more likely to fire together, and it speeds up neuroplasticity. So whatever you're learning or training on, any kind of movement, then you get better faster.
Now I have to ask, because I thought of this, and this might be a controversial question, but I feel like if I'm ever going to get to ask someone who knows the answer, it's going to be you. Is this going to be something like we discover like 20 years from now, like 5G, where we're like, oh, we probably shouldn't have been doing that? Or is this a technology that's already been tested, flushed out, used, and is widely considered to be safe?
So it's the latter. And the short answer is it's safe, but it's something we take seriously, especially kind of coming from this background in implantable devices and things like that. There's a lot of analysis around this. So there's a few parts of that answer. I'm going to give you the long answer because safety is important. Part of the answer is part of the answer is this technology has been out there in the world being studied by a ton of hundreds, if not 1,000 or more scientists all over the world. Tens of thousands of people have done sessions by this point. In all of those studies, it's shown to be safe. Now, what does safe mean? It means that most people feel a little bit of tingling once in a while. On very rare occasions, somebody has a headache, for instance. But then when you go and look at the data, a lot of the time that headache is just because they're wearing a fairly heavy headset or tight strap around their head or whatever. So that's one part of the answer. Another part of the answer is we've had Halo Sport out in the world for a few years now. We shipped our first product in November of 2016. And one thing we do is we actually follow up with our customers and we track everybody's experiences. And that data basically lines up with what you see in the scientific literature. So that gives us some more confidence. The final part of the answer is, when you're introducing a new technology, you also want to think about basic principles. What is this thing doing? And it's increasing neuroplasticity, but it's not increasing neuroplasticity beyond what you would experience on one of your best, most engaged days ever. So, we're not overclocking the brain here. We're helping bring that neuroplasticity where and when you want it in the context of your training or your practice, and be able to do that consistently, and then the benefits add up.
Well, I'm really, really glad I asked. That is a solid answer. And I was just as you were wrapping going to ask. So essentially what you're doing is just kind of recreating something that the brain could do on its own if you were in your best flow state on your best day.
Right. And the power here is being able to do that, day after day at your 5 a.m. workout where, I guarantee none of us are at our best every time we train or practice. And this helps you get closer to being at your best every time.
100%. Now, is there a tapering of the efficacy? I mean, if you're doing this over and over and over again, does it become less effective, or is it really just like consistently hitting your peak every single time you train?
So the effect on neuroplasticity doesn't taper. Or, stepping back as a scientist, I'll put it this way: there's no evidence that the effect on neuroplasticity tapers if you use this every day for X amount of time. Now, at some point, you're going to reach a plateau in what you're trying to learn, and maybe you're limited by just your physical capacity, or you're at the point where it's really hard to measure further improvement. But if you're serious about getting better at something, what you do then, whether or not you're using something like brain stimulation, is then you mix it up. You cycle your training around, so you're focusing on the next thing that's really hard for you. You get better at that, and then you integrate that into your song or into your technique or whatever you're trying to learn.
Really, really cool. So what can we do with this? I know your website, your marketing, your user manual, stuff like that talk about musical instruments and athletics. What are people using this kind of technology for? And I know not only have you all done your own independent scientific research, but as you said, this technology has been in academia and has been researched. So what can people do with this? Where should I be taking this Halo Neuro with me?
Right. So there's one answer for motor cortex stimulation, which is what Halo Sport does. And then let me take a sec to talk about kind of the broader picture, because the technology has a lot of further applications. But so Halo Sport, it stimulates motor cortex, which means accelerating benefits from movement practice, because the part of the brain that controls your body, your primary motor cortex, is right underneath the band of a pair of headphones, which was awesome because it meant we could make something that looks cool, whether you're an athlete or a musician. You can wear it to the gym and people aren't, hey, who's that nutcase wearing some crazy headgear. But so people are using Halo Sport for all kinds of sports, both kind of, power and endurance sports, everything from cycling to powerlifting, because a huge part of your strength output is neurological, and a huge part of whether you can keep it together as an endurance athlete in the face of pain and fatigue comes down to how well you've baked in your technique. So we've got cyclists and runners and rowers using the product. And then, a lot of, kind of what you call technique athletes, everybody from, gymnasts to, we've got a flamenco dancer who's an enthusiastic Halo user, golfers, tennis players, and then musicians. It's really been awesome to see how musicians have adopted the technology. And when you think about it, a musician is, you're an athlete. You're doing something amazing with your body. And one cool thing about musicians is if you're out there performing or really trying to build your repertoire, you're constantly having to learn new stuff. You're every week you get a new piece that you're expected to perform at a professional level with the orchestra, 3 weeks from then. And, I guarantee Steph Curry isn't learning a fundamentally new jump shot technique
right
every week. But if you're a working musician, you're kind of on the hook to do that. So that's pretty cool.
That is really, really cool. I never thought about it that way, that these are some of the most dynamic learners out there for sure. And I want to verify something that you said. I've been thinking in my mind that this was all about dexterity and muscle memory, which is part of the reason why I haven't prioritized, trying this before I go to the gym, because I'm like, I already know how to squat. But if I'm hearing you correctly, this can also improve strength output and kind of muscle development. Or did I mishear that?
So I'm not going to say muscle development, because it's not changing physiologically what's happening with your muscle fibers. But here's the thing. So here's a cool example. If you look at somebody who just, they haven't been lifting much and they just start a strength program at the gym, you actually gain a lot of strength in the first few weeks before any possible remodeling of your muscle fibers. And the reason for that is because your motor systems are actually getting better at passing the right coordinated signal to your muscles to have everything fire smoothly and efficiently. So, and a lot of the fundamental research in this field has shown, you can improve rate of force development. What as an athlete you call explosiveness with brain stimulation, because that's all about how can you wrangle all the nerve fibers that innervate your muscle to all fire at exactly the right time and exactly the right sequence. So yeah, a huge part of strength is neurological.
That is really interesting. I once saw, there was this show way back in the day, Stan Lee's Superhumans, and he would go out and find real world superhumans. And there was a guy who had superhuman strength in his hands, of all things. I mean, this guy could bend iron rods 5 times thicker than a normal human being. And they took him into the lab and they studied and figured out that he didn't have more muscle fiber or even more dense muscle fiber in his hands. Somehow, and I think he'd spent years and years working with his hands, he had just developed the ability to use 100% of the muscle fiber in his hands. So it was a brain-hand connection thing more than it was. I mean, he obviously had strong hands, but not that much stronger than your average person. And it was really, really cool to see.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. So tell me about other devices that you see that, you admire, that you think are interesting? You are in the wearable space. You're a biomedical engineer. What are some of the devices that you use or different things that you use to hack your brain specifically? And then we'll get into all sorts of performance hacks, I'm sure, later.
I'm a little bit old school sometimes. I'm kind of selective about what I use. And this might seem like an answer from a few years ago, but I've kind of rediscovered Strava lately, actually, and started being thoughtful again about how do I kind of close the loop, because one of the big kind of tenets of any kind of training is you've got to be measuring your outcomes. You have to have this understanding of how well did that go, and that's the thing that closes the loop, so your brain can understand how to do that thing that worked again, and then not do this other thing that didn't work. So, one thing I've realized about myself is that I'm really motivated by the numbers and the feeling of kind of topping some limit that even that I had reached years ago. So I recently got my GPS dialed up again, and I got my heart rate monitor, and I'm back on Strava, and it's been really, really fun, and I've realized just how much that helps me get motivated to go out there and run, especially now. I've been off the running for a few years, and I'm trying to kind of start building it back up again. It's been really fun.
So I'm actually not familiar with Strava. Tell me more.
Oh, awesome! So it's an app. There's a web interface as well. It integrates with a lot of stuff, but it tracks your runs, it tracks your rides. You can use it for other stuff as well. But one of the cool things that they do, and I think Strava was actually the first to do this, is anybody using Strava, you can it tracks what your times are on whatever segments of your run or your ride or whatever. So if you've got let's say every day there's a 1,000 cyclists that ride down the peninsula just from here and there, and let's say 50 of them happen to be using Strava. It gathers those times together, and you can actually look back on it and say, I have of all the Strava users in the world, I have the gold medal time on this segment of Kenyatta Road that goes from the reservoir to the 92, that kind of thing. And
that's neat.
And yeah, if I recall correctly, they actually had to, back in the early days, they had to scope it down a little bit, because there was a problem with people. People were just going crazy on urban segments and riding around the city like nutcases, because they wanted they wanted to have the course record on some ridiculous dash through Market Street on Strava. But it's really cool, and it's really motivating. Especially if you're somebody who's kind of motivated by competition. It's a good time.
Really neat. Do you use any kind of sleep trackers?
So I don't, but one thing I've realized over the last couple years is kind of the value of being mindful about my sleep. I've always been one of these people. I think I spent my entire college experience and then virtually all of my 20s and part of my 30s being the guy who's like, I don't need any sleep. Sleep is for the weak. It's when you're really engaged in something, it's kind of exciting to pull that all-nighter, and you come out of it, you're like, oh, look at me, I worked so hard, I got this done, I pulled an all-nighter, yeah, and maybe it's just kind of my prefrontal cortex has actually gotten its act together and made me a little wiser, or maybe it's kind of the effect of age. I'm 45, but realizing sleep is important. Sleep is it's the body's time to rest and recover, and if you don't get that, then you're probably hurting yourself in the long run. And there's a really cool, you may have seen it, but there's a study that just came out that showed one of the things that's happening during sleep is these slow waves of brain activity during sleep. Anytime you have brain activity, the brain is demanding more or less oxygen and metabolic resources. So you have these changes in blood flow that occur when you have changes in brain activity. turns out that when you sleep, that's actually pumping out some of the waste products.
Yep.
And that's like, I read that and I'm like, I guess I'm sleeping more.
Absolutely.
What a thing to learn.
Yeah, and that your brain actually can't clear those metabolites unless you are asleep.
Exactly.
It's just too busy doing other stuff while you're awake, which is really, really cool. What are some of the other things you're doing, if anything? I mean, you'd mentioned you're old school, but you know a lot about the brain and you spend a lot of time thinking about brain performance. What are other things that you do to optimize the performance of your brain and also the kind of speed at which you learn?
Right. So one thing that I've been working on, and this is kind of part learning and just part kind of general effectiveness and productivity. But I've been thinking hard about being mindful of doing the thing that actually needs to be done when the thing needs to be done. In other words, especially when you're working on interesting projects, and neurotech is a pretty darn interesting project. There's the things that you want to focus on. You want to look at the cool new data that you just got from this study. You want to dive in and fix some bug in your software or whatever. And then there are the things that the things that need to be done, like you've got some contract to review, or you've got some email you have to send that isn't as fun as looking at the data. But I guess this kind of lines up with it's been actually part of the journey of starting and running a technology company. Is you get to this point in your career where you've got to realize that the most effectiveness that you can have and the biggest contribution you can make sometimes is in helping make other people more effective. If you're doing something that makes 10 other people more effective, then that's going to be higher value to the world and to the organization than me going and poking at this data with with my single brain. And so I guess I've been forcing myself to do that, and it's translated to before I started being kind of thoughtful about this, it never felt like it didn't feel like that would be productivity, and it didn't feel like that would yield any kind of learning. But it makes me feel productive. It's the right thing to do. It gets the job done faster, and also there's another type of learning about kind of all the meta stuff. How projects play out and how people operate, and it's been kind of a fascinating journey over the past few years of running a company.
All right, let's take a quick pause and thank this episode's sponsor, BlueBlock's blue light blocking glasses, the only blue light blocking company in the world that create evidence-backed lenses for filtering blue and green light. Their Australian lab-built lens technology is fitted into the most fashionable frames, and they can even make prescription and reading glasses in their optics lab. So whether you want to wear their Sleep Plus glasses that block 100% of blue and green light, their Summer Glow mood booster glasses, or even blue light computer glasses that don't have a yellow tint, BlueBlox has you covered. Now, I like to wear the Sleep Plus glasses 2 to 3 hours before bed, and they really, really help your sleep. I also like to wear the daytime ones for reducing digital eye strain, headaches, and lowering stress. Now, BlueBlox has free and fast worldwide shipping, and if you use code SUPERHUMAN at checkout, you can get 15% off any pair that you want. Just go to BlueBlox.com, that's BlueBlox.com, and enter code SUPERHUMAN to save 15%. All right, let's get back to the episode. I think that's a helpful reminder because I'm on a very similar but in a way opposite journey right now of figuring out, like, as we grow our business, what are the things that I just don't enjoy doing and I'm not good enough at to justify doing and delegating those things out to other people. And yet it is easy to take that, as I've recently learned, way too far and delegate out things that you just can't and shouldn't delegate out. So there is this kind of balance, I think. But hopefully you're not spending your whole day doing things you don't want to be doing because, as Dan Sullivan would say, you want to spend your entire day doing things that are in your unique ability.
Exactly.
Fascinate, motivate, and give you passion. Now, you did mention, what you'd rather be doing is look at all the cool data that came out. You've done a good bit of research around the technology that you guys provide, and I guess I'd be remiss, to jump back a little bit. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that research a little bit. I mean, how much of a difference are we talking here? Is this like that extra 5% edge, or is this like 50% more? How do you even measure, I guess, speed of learning?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So the gold standard here is randomized, double-blinded, sham, placebo-controlled studies. So we've done some of those, and a lot of other folks out there in the scientific community have done these as well, and in the athletic training community. One example is we did a study with the U.S. national ski and snowboard team, and they trained for their ski jumpers trained for 3 weeks with brain stimulation. Half of them got real stimulation, half of them got fake stimulation. And first of all, it was just awesome to do this because they measure everything. They're super scientific about what they do. But the upshot was it's training, so everybody got better. But the group that got the real stimulation got 31% better. The group that got the fake stimulation got 17% better. So it's not, we're not downloading kung fu into your brain. Yeah, but it's a meaningful moderate improvement, and then when you pile that on day after day and week after week, that compounds to make you to make you better than you otherwise would be.
That's really cool. I mean, that's effectively twice as fast. How do they measure got better? I mean, speed? Yeah. What's the quantifiable metric?
Yeah. So they had the thing that they were working on was the jump that the jumpers do when they get down to the bottom of the ramp. Because when you get down to the bottom of a ski jump ramp, before I saw this in action, I always thought that it was kind of flipped up at the end. It's not. They've got a lot of the loft comes from them actually doing this incredibly smooth and coordinated jump up into the air. So they simulate this. They simulate this in their lab because you can't go down the ramp 50 times in a couple hours. So they do it in the lab. It's a force plate for kind of a standard vertical leap kind of movement, but they're on rollers. So they call it the slippery foot jump. It's crazy hard to do. And they measure the net impulse. In other words, kind of the net propulsive impulse that they get when they jump, and also the smoothness of the jump with a measure called tortuosity entropy. And then those are the outcomes of the trial that they measure.
That is so cool. And once again, I'm really glad I asked that because, I have the benefit that a lot of what I teach is it's really easy to quantify. Today you could remember 15 vocabulary words, and yesterday you could only remember 5 vocabulary words. That's the power of mnemonic techniques. But it's so much more difficult to quantify something like piano. I guess, speed of how well you can play a piece is one thing. Tell me a bit about your piano practice and how it's been impacted by this technology.
Yeah. So I'm a mostly nowadays kind of a jazz, rock, and blues piano player. I've been in some bands and whatnot, and now my practice is limited to what I can squeeze in, after my kids go to bed, or once in a while, playing in the mornings or whatever. And that's kind of another thread here because it's most people get to a point in life where your time is really limited to practice or to train or whatever, and it becomes super meaningful to be able to get a little bit more out of that because you don't have the 3 hours a day or 5 hours a day or whatever to practice or train that you did when you were in your 20s. But so I've used Halo, for working on some of the underlying technical stuff behind improvisation. Doing doing chords, doing inversions. What I've found is the way that translates to playing and performing is when you've got just more of an ability to just grab that augmented C chord or whatever when you need it and when you want it, and to just have all the right inversions kind of at your fingertips, then that translates to more free expression, and that's what makes the music better.
Yeah, I definitely found, I've struggled for a really long time that I call it my dumb left hand. I'm right-handed, and my left hand, I can play with my left hand, but my left hand is very dumb. I can just slam on a chord and then do all kinds of neat stuff with the right hand, and play the melody. But I've had a really hard time, and I used the Halo Neuro for a couple sessions, and suddenly my left hand is still pretty dumb relative, but I can do things. I have patterns, and it's the only way I can describe it is like the muscle memory was stickier, and all of a sudden the things that I figured out slowly, I could play a lot faster the next time.
Exactly. Yeah, and you need that ability you need to bake it into muscle memory, and you need that ability to just to be able to grab the chords without thinking about it. I'm in the same boat. I'm actually left-handed, and my left hand is still the dumber one when it comes to piano. Just I think I spent a lot of time previously over the past years just being really lazy about my left hand and kind of focusing on and I just I tend to just grab the octave, and it's not what it could be. So it's really fun getting better at that.
Absolutely. Now I am assuming that these effects only take place after sleep. Have you guys looked into that a little bit, or what the time period between sessions is for optimizing?
So the overwhelming majority of all of the research here has been with doing one session per day. And that's actually what we recommend because we're anchored in that research, is doing it once a day. Now, there's been a lot of folks who have studied, what you'd call kind of a carryover from one day to the next. Now, first of all, the effects and what you learn, it lives on like the effects of any other kind of training. It's been studied out to the 6-month point. There's every reason to believe it continues, after that, like any other result of training. But in terms of consolidation overnight, there is some evidence that what you learn on one day, you're even better the next day after you consolidate it. Just from my experience, I completely believe that. I think the data aren't 100% conclusive, but I think the data it's suggestive of that, and there's some pretty good data on that.
Yeah, I was going to say I would have a very hard time believing that you would get the immediate benefits. If you practiced over your coffee and then you took a lunch break 3-4 hours later, something in just, again, my experience teaching people about memory and watching the kind of crazy miracles people can do when they're trained to use their brains. I am betting you gotta sleep for that consolidation. Yeah. And kind of going back to brain stimulation, there's this isn't what Halo does, but some folks have studied using brain stimulation and basically tuning it to come in at exactly the right stage of sleep to when you're doing memory consolidation. And there's some data out there dating back to like 2005, I think, showing that you actually get better consolidation of memory if you do the brain stimulation during that exact right stage of sleep. Yeah. That's very cool. That's very, very cool. What other kinds of things do you think in the future we're going to be able to use? This is a total conjecture question, but I imagine you guys are a venture-backed company. You probably have a product pipeline of very interesting and amazing developments that one day you hope to build. What do you think other technology in between now and Neuralink that connects us all to, super intelligence? What other things can we do? What other devices can we build to kind of hack our brains a little bit and improve their performance?
Right. So there have always been two really good clusters of data in this whole field. One is for movement, and we went there first because it let us build headphones, and the data were clearest, and its movement it's relatively easy to understand sometimes compared to cognition. The other cluster of really interesting good data are in improving what you'd call cognitive control, attention, focus, working memory, that kind of thing with brain stimulation. Now that it's a different target. It's frontal cortex, this part of the brain called dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. It's basically your brain's get your act together center. It's involved in this thing called cognitive control, which is wrangling all of your brain to do what you need it to do at any given moment. And it's probably a poorly kept secret at this point that we're interested in those applications. It's something that we are researching. We're not ready to present a product to the world yet, but I think that's something a lot of people in the field are trying to figure out, and that relates to a lot of other kinds of learning. Whether it's language learning or academic learning. That's something that when we all nail that, it's going to change the world. Even more than being able to speed up benefits from movement training.
So this could be the headband that makes Adderall obsolete, and we don't have to be prescribing kids medication for them to be able to sit and pay attention.
That's the hope sometime. Yeah. And, just to be clear to the listeners, that's not Halo Sport. Halo Sport stimulates motor cortex for movement. But, there's been some really cool research even just this year. This guy, Rob Reinhardt at Boston University, did this study where he took a population of older individuals. All of our working memory gets a little worse as we get older. He took some participants where this was measurable, and he stimulated these two parts of the brain, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and temporal cortex. And part of this whole working memory thing involves those two parts of the brain talking to each other. So he stimulated them in sync with each other, and showed that the brain signals associated with working memory got stronger, the synchrony between those two sites. And then he showed that their working memory got better, exactly as much as the brain signals improved. And it was this really cool study because not only did he do that, he did it a couple different ways. He did it the opposite way and showed that it actually makes people a little worse. It kind of made and published it in a way where it really all hung together. So that's something I think everybody in the field's pretty excited about the potential here.
That is really cool. Any other things you see further down the future that can really optimize? I mean, I guess I'll throw in, I met someone at Genius Network's annual event where they were using electrical signals to induce states of consciousness. So right now what they're working on is how can we alleviate treatment-resistant depression and things like that. But in the future, he kind of alluded to me, and I won't mention the name of the entrepreneur because he kind of said this to me in confidence, that in the future we could replace drugs, which are very dangerous, and give people the ability to switch it on and switch it off. So you want to take MDMA with your marriage counselor or therapist to work through trauma. You want to have an ayahuasca-like experience. They believe, and I don't know, maybe you agree, disagree, but they believe that they might be able to recreate those states of mind with electrical signals, which is pretty neat.
It really is, yeah. I guess I think that is in the future, and I guess the one caveat there, I think it'll happen. When it does happen, it's going to need to involve a really highly personalized form of neurotechnology, because everybody's brain is different, and everybody has different triggers that help put them into different states, and your brain responds differently. It's the most personalized organ there is because it's you. And one thing I think everybody who works in this field has been learning and continues to learn is as soon as you close the loop, as soon as you start to respect and respond to the brain's signals and think about how to treat everybody differently, then this whole technology gets more and more powerful. So that's kind of the wave of the future, not just in personalized medicine, but particularly in neurotech. That's what we spent 15 years working on in epilepsy at the previous company, because everybody's seizures are different, and we ended up with a device that had 600 parameters that optimize it to any given individual, and then we had to learn how to make software that helped the doctor optimize that. So it's personalization in neurotech. That's going to be the key that unlocks all these amazing things like being able to turn on and off a modulation of your brain state with a switch.
Fantastic. And could we really create any chemical state of the mind? I mean, could an experience like LSD be digitized, do you think?
So there's a level of that where we might have to wait for Neuralink and folks like them to do their thing. There's a lot of the really key brain centers that it's the deep nuclei that really govern a lot of this stuff. There's a level of complexity in the brain that we can probably only address when we're at the point where we can do basically brain implants for this kind of thing, and this. So I'll make a prediction here, and this might be this might be a surprising prediction to many, but I think what you might call consumer or performance enhancing implantable neurotechnology, it might happen sooner than any of us think. It's not going to happen in the next 5 years, or maybe not in the next 10 years, but if you have something that's safe and gives people a real benefit in their lives, then people want to use it. You look at you look at something like cosmetic surgery. People are willing to do a whole lot of things to get some benefit in their lives, and so I think that there's a threshold that we're going to cross, and at some point, maybe a decade from now, it's not at all going to be out of the question to get maybe the equivalent of a 10 years advanced from now, Bluetooth headset just implanted, so you can sub-vocalize to your AI assistant, that kind of thing.
Really cool. And I'm sure we will figure out a non-invasive way to do these things as well. Hopefully, yeah. Really, really neat. So we've pretty much come up on time here, Brett. I do want to ask you, where can people learn more about you and about the things that you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is www.haloneuro.com, HALONEURO. And for myself personally, I'm probably most active on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Wingeier, WINGEIER. And always glad to chat with people.
Fantastic. And I have to give a huge shout out to Tom on your team, Tom Griffin, who actually set up a really awesome discount code for folks if they want to try out Halo Neuro, which is $75 off. Super generous of you guys. You didn't have to do that. But if anyone wants to take advantage of that, they can use the coupon code SUPERHUMAN on haloneuro.com. And we'll put a link in the blog post for this episode. So thank you both to Tom and to you, Brett, for making that happen. That is really generous. I think that's one of the most generous discounts anyone's ever offered to our listeners.
Awesome. It's our pleasure, and we're psyched to be part of this conversation.
Absolutely. So, Brett, one last question I always ask people before I let them go. If people take away one big message from this episode and carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that to be?
I'd love for people just to take away that the brain is amazingly plastic. You can learn almost anything at any point in life if you're thoughtful about it. And the brain's amazing. Go forth and learn. That's my takeaway.
Love that. And that is a message that you and I can both agree on. Brett, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a blast. I really enjoyed getting to, no pun intended here, pick your brain.
It's been awesome, Jonathan. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit superhuman.blog. While you're at it, please take a moment to share this episode with a friend and leave us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.